Hello, Dr. Margaret Dietrich. I'm glad having you here today. To start off, I would want to ask you um, concerning immigration in the 60s. In 1965, Congress passed an Immigration and Nationality Act. I don't know if you know about that, but it kind of created a preference system for immigrants and eliminated quotas based on nationality. Um, did you experience a lot of immigration? Do you think it was too much, or was it exactly right? And what was your kind of take on that Immigration Act in the 60s?
In the 60s.
65 was it so?
Oh, in 65, I was doing the immigrating. Because my husband was drafted into the military. And then after he did his training, he was sent to Germany. And fortunately, I was able to go also.
Oh, and immigrate into the United States.
So we immigrated to Germany rather than, and of course, you know, we were on an army base, and so we were the people doing the immigrating, but they also had a large contingency of people who lived in Turkey and were working on the army base. So
in Germany.
In Germany, yes. And we were still, you know, in the height of Vietnam.
Yes.
And so people were able to get out during that time, and so I think that's where most of our immigrants were coming from, the Far East.
Yeah, that gives me a pretty good view. Yeah. Did you feel like that racism and hatred has been increasing because of the immigration in the United States?
Up to about the last 3 or 4 years, I would say no, but now, because of what's going on, how people are coming over and coming in illegally, parents are being separated from their own children, and that is a totally different way to do immigration, and I am certainly not in favor of the way they are doing it right now, and splitting up families. I just am worried about it, and how in the world they thought this would be a good way to do it. So I think we're in, you know, it's not a good time. I have a friend that immigrated from Wales. She married an American soldier who was stationed in England, and we were just talking about this yesterday, and she was very upset. Even though she was married to an American, she couldn't apply for citizenship for 7 years. And then when she became a citizen, she had to know the Constitution. She needed to know the Bill of Rights. And of course now, as far as I know, none of those things are required.
Furthermore, to the topic of equality, do you, in the 70s there was people were pushing gender equality in workplaces, with male and female workers or students at universities. Were you a part of that movement, and what did you think of women's rights in the 70s?
Well, I wasn't quite part of it, but being female, there was a lot going on, and some things were a little more difficult, and at that time I was still in graduate school and finished up my doctorate in 72. So I was somewhat isolated from that because we were on the college campus. You know, and there wasn't, as far as I knew, a tremendous amount of that going on. But there were some little side things with, at first I was working in a lab when we moved to Michigan. And there were some things going on somewhat behind my back, and I was the only female. And so there was one graduate student in particular that didn't like me being there. And there were some other side issues, so I don't think it would apply to this.
I mean, feminism still exists nowadays. It's just become different.
It's definitely still in existence. Great changes have occurred, but because of the makeup of the United States right now, and with all the immigration coming in, I think more of it's racial now, or ethnicity, rather than male-female.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, now a shift in topic. In the 80s, there was the NASA Challenger explosion, if you can remember. They had the space program, they launched a rocket, and 73 seconds after the liftoff, it just exploded. It killed 7 crew members and changed their space program forever. How do you feel about that explosion? Why was it actually a big deal? Or wasn't it a big deal?
The explosion? Oh, I think it was a big deal. That's something, in the back of their minds, they knew some things could happen, but we certainly never expected anything to happen. I mean, it was a shock, and it was terrible, and it was very difficult for us to accept that and think, okay, do we continue with the space program or not? And obviously we have continued with that, but it was such a shock, and again, that area is still more male dominated.
Yes,
even though we do have some females, but it's still male dominated.
For sure, but the Challenger was the first one that carried the first woman, and it also the first black person into space. And some people say that's kind of like representative. Another thing, because the space program in general was kind of a thing that symbolized this arms race between the United States and Russia, correct? Do you think that was like, this explosion kind of was a little bit of a demotivation for a Cold War, basically?
I don't think so. I think if anything, maybe it could be looked at as a thrust to keep going and trying to do things better. And it's hard when you think about the technology that goes into that whole space, and what wasn't caught, like in the final reviews and the final checks before the astronauts boarded and went into space. You would have thought that we had enough background and enough people with knowledge and know-how that something like that wouldn't really expect that. And of course then the idea with the Russians, we've been with them in competition with them, and I don't think the explosion diminished that at all.
Okay, now we're coming to more even topics that are important nowadays. Namely in the 90s, climate scientists became a thing. They became a dominant group of scientists during that period of time. And I would like to know, because things have changed since then, but that's where it kind of started. How did you feel back then about climate change and environmental issues, and how do you feel about it now?
Well, I'm not sure I paid too much attention before, but now definitely. The Earth is changing.
Yes.
Even just looking at the United States, all of the weather-related catastrophes we've had, and somehow we need to be looking at that. I was just talking to friends in Pennsylvania, and here we are just about at the middle of May, and they still have snow.
Yeah.
Now that has not occurred often. And then we look at all the melting, the glaciers, it definitely is an issue that needs a great deal of attention right now.
For
and
sure.
that, and I do believe that more and more people are becoming aware of climate changes and again what's happening, what's causing all of this.
Yeah.
Because just looking at how many tornadoes or hurricanes we've had in the past year, lots of flooding.
Yes.
These things, before
did not
you
have
could
that
say,
frequently.
oh, the hurricanes are in the south. They're Florida, you know, Louisiana, those, you know, but now they're coming all over the place. When we lived in Michigan in the mid 60s to 1972, the weather was terrible, and but we could say tornadoes, hurricanes are along the coast.
Yeah.
We actually, one week that we were there, we had to evacuate our apartment every day of that week because of tornadoes. They put up the warning, and we were in a 2-story apartment building with a flat roof, and we had to evacuate and go across the street and go to the basement of the dorm that was closest to us. Well, whoever thought, I know you haven't had a lot of experience with Michigan, but whoever thought tornadoes would be coming to Michigan? And we can't say, well, that's tornado country, because they're going all over.
Yeah.
And so major changes there.
Yeah. Do you use social media? It's kind of related to it because social media is kind of like we're living in a time where advertisement, there's never been more money in advertisement than ever. And advertisement is also the reason why we have such a great consumer society. Like, we consume so many goods and services more than ever before, which contributes to climate change. Yes. Do you use social media at all? If so, how do you like it? And if not, why
much.
Don't you use
not
it?
much at all.
Why not?
Technology's not my forte. I'll admit it.
Yes.
And now that I'm not working, I really am not doing much at all with it. I'm sort of living in my own little bubble right now. But there are times when I need to do this. I need to use a computer, and it has its pros and it has its cons. But
computers are even older.
For some reason, I think I have a block. I have a mental block on all of this. And the harder I try, it seems like the worse it gets.
Okay, my last question, very recent topic. How do you think the United States should react to the war in Ukraine? Because that's like all over the news. I know you probably don't even want to hear about it. Is it comparable to former wars? Can you at least tell me that?
Well, I think it's not that different from Vietnam.
It's not that different?
Well, from the standpoint of what's going on, our soldiers went to Nam and they fought, and we lost, and now we're supplying different materials for the Ukraine. I don't think that Putin should have ordered that, and to me it looks like he's trying to get back all those old countries that were a part of Russia. Yes, that were a part of that, the USSR. And for some reason, this is my opinion of it, that he's trying to get those back, and he started with the Ukraine, and there's no reason. Those people have suffered so much.
Yes.
In fact, I'm living at the Spires, and there is a man there that was born in the Ukraine, and they were put in a camp when he was 5 years old. His father had to go and work in a factory. The father was separated from the family, and they were put in like a displaced person camp.
Oh God.
And he's gone through all of that, and as far as I can see, there was no reason to do that. and something has to happen soon. You look at those pictures on the news, destroying everything.
Yes.
And people are leaving their homes. That area had been decimated before during World War II. People were killed, people were starved, people were these are not things that we really know about, but this person that was born there, I read his autobiography recently, and he has a lot of this material in his autobiography, which we didn't really pay much attention to. Back then we were, and I'm not trying to diminish this, we tended to focus on the Holocaust.
Yes.
Well, there was another one going on in the Ukraine, and they just went in to kill people.
Yeah.
And many times they locked them in buildings and set the building on fire, and they could not get out. Now, this isn't in the history books, but this is what my friend experienced and his family members. So, no, I don't think it should be going on, and I'm afraid of where it can go.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think our time is up, but thank you so much for the nice talk that we had.
You're welcome.